Hare Krishna, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So we're continuing this afternoon, where I am anyway, with this reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Creation, Chapter 2, Divinity and Divine Service, and we are up to text number 23, which we'll have up for you. First, I'll say, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So far, with text one, I'll just read a few of the translations. Let's just start back with text 18 and just read the translations. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental song, is established as an irrevocable fact. As soon as irrevocable loving service is established in the heart, the effects of nature's modes of passion and ignorance, such as lust, desire, and hankering, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness, and he becomes completely happy. 20. Thus established in the mode of unalloyed goodness, the man whose mind has been enlivened by contact with devotional service to the Lord gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association. 21. Thus the knot in the heart is pierced, and all misgivings are cut to pieces. The chain of fruitive actions is terminated when one sees the self as master. Certainly, therefore, since time immemorial, all transcendentalists have been rendering devotional service to Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, with great delight, because such devotional service is enlivening to the self. So now we're up to text number 23. We go into a little more detail now to that kind of survey. So 23 goes like this. Sattvam rajastama iti prakritir gunastaya yukta pura purusha eka ihasya datte Stityadaye hari virinchi hari iti samshna Shreyam sitatra kalu sattvatanor ninamshu. So the running translation here by Srila Prabhupada. The transcendental personality of Godhead is indirectly associated with the three modes of material nature, namely passion, goodness, and ignorance. And just for the material world's creation, maintenance, and destruction, he accepts the three qualitative forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Of these three, all human beings can derive ultimate benefit from Vishnu, the form of the quality of goodness. We have a simpler translation from of the same verse from Banu Swami. The one supreme Purusha, accepting the gunas of Prakriti, known as Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, for creation, maintenance, and destruction, is called Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. The best results for devotees will come from Vishnu with Shuddha, Sattva, body. It's a little different, huh? So if we look at this, so it first starts with the list of the Prakriti, the modes of nature, Sattvam, Raja, and Tama, goodness, passion, and ignorance, Iti. Thus, remember that's like quotation marks around that. These are the qualities of material nature. And yukta says associated with, which joined really just simply. But you notice that in the translation, Prabhupada has the word indirectly, which you don't see explicitly mentioned here in the translation. He says indirectly associated with the three modes of nature, namely passion, goodness, and ignorance. So he says here he's indirectly associated, but that he is para purushaha ekaha, the one transcendental personality who accepts these modes, or is somehow is yukta to him, related to them. Why does he accept them? Because of, in the Sanskrit, sthiti adaye. For sthiti is maintenance, sthiti, and then creation, srishti, and destruction. So these three phases, things, this is the material world. Things are coming into being, they last a while, they destroy, they come back again. This is the circle of nature, creation, maintenance, and destruction. Creation means mode of passion, maintenance means mode of goodness, destruction means mode of ignorance. So this is these three phases, and therefore it's mentioned here next, Hari, Virinchi, and Hara. Hari, Vishnu, the personality of Godhead who takes charge of who's in charge of the mode of goodness. Virinchi, Brahma, who is in charge of creation, and Hara, Lord Shiva, the mode of ignorance or destruction. So these three different features are there. And so for doing this, he accepts, it says here in the translation, the qualitative forms, qualitative meaning of the modes of nature, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And then for ultimate benefit, Shreyamsi, of course, the form of Sattva, the one who is Vishnu, the form of the quality of goodness who is Vishnu, ultimate benefit is there. That's how it's. So you can see that in some ways, Bhanu Swami's is a little more literal. He said the best result for devotees will come from Vishnu with Shuddha Sattva body. So you see that form, Shuddha Sattva. So now we will turn to the purport by Srila Prabhupada. That Lord Sri Krishna, by his plenary parts, plenary means full of power, should be rendered devotional service, as explained above, is confirmed by this statement. Lord Sri Krishna and all his plenary parts are Vishnu Tattva, or lordship, the lordship of Godhead. From Sri Krishna, the next manifestation is Baladev. From Baladev is Sankarshana. From Sankarshana is Narayana. From Narayana, there is the second Sankarshana. And from this Sankarshana, the Vishnu Purusha avatars. So here, this is the expansions of Vishnu forms. The plenary parts here that are in full power are Vishnu Tattva, the lordship of Godhead, he says here. So there's Krishna, and then he expands as Baladev, then Sankarshan, and then Narayana, the second Sankarshana, and then the Purusha avatars are going to be discussed next. This will be explained in more detail later on in the Bhagavatam, all these, how the Lord expands himself in so many different forms. Sometimes people say that God couldn't be a person because that would limit him. No, he's a person, but he has multiple forms. So he's not limited at all. If he was just a cloud of gas, that would be pretty limiting. So, or he had no form whatsoever. So he's got so many forms because he's unlimited. So much of this that's in this sentence will be explained in the course of our study. The Vishnu, or the deity of the quality of goodness in the material world, is the Purusha avatar known as Shirodakshayi Vishnu, or Paramatma. So here, there's the three modes of nature. So the quality of goodness is actually taken charge of by Vishnu himself. And then he has his expansion of the Shirodakshayi Vishnu, that's Shira Udaka Shayi Vishnu, the Vishnu who is lying on the milk ocean. So all this, how things are expanded will be explained. Or he is also present as Paramatma. He is the super soul, the self of all the selves, and then he enters into the bodies of every living being, Paramatma. So that's one little short ride in a fast machine there. You whiz by all these, but they'll be explained later. Then Brahma is the deity of Rajas, passion, and Shiva of ignorance. They are the three departmental heads of the three qualities of this material world. Creation is made possible by Brahma's quality of passion and his endeavor. So he is the creator, and creation takes place in the mode of passion. Creation, and you might notice procreation, this requires the mode of passion. So creation is made possible by Brahma's quality of passion and his endeavor. It is maintained by the goodness of Vishnu, so Vishnu himself, who is one of the expansions of Krishna, but also he's in charge of goodness. And when it requires to be destroyed, Lord Shiva does it by the Tandava Nritya, the ferocious dance of destruction. Tandava Nritya. The materialists and the foolish human beings worship Brahma and Shiva respectively. That is to say, the materialists worship Brahma and the foolish worship Shiva. But the pure transcendentalists worship the form of goodness, Vishnu, in his various forms. Vishnu is manifested by his millions and billions of integrated and separated forms. So now, okay, the forms, he is manifested by these forms, and he said integrated and separated. And then he says the integrated forms are called Godhead, and the separated forms are called the living entities or the jivas. Both the jivas and Godhead have their original spiritual forms. Jivas are sometimes subjected to the control of material energy, but the Vishnu forms are always controllers of this energy. So you can see how he makes this distinction between the integrated and separated. In one sense, you're not separated, but in another sense, if you're controlled indirectly and unfavorably by the material energy, then you are, in a sense, separated. So when Vishnu, the personality of Godhead, appears in the material world, he comes to deliver the conditioned living beings who are under the material energy. Such living beings appear in the material world with intentions of being lords, and thus they become entrapped by the three modes of nature. The intentions of being lords: I am the enjoyer, I am the controller. This is the intention of being lords, of manipulating and using material nature for sense gratification. Humans do it, animals do it. We have in the yard next door to us a flock of chickens, which has a rooster, and you should hear him crow. He's a tempered little lord of the barnyard, you might say. So they have this intentions of being lords, and thus they become entrapped by the three modes of nature. You're thinking, I am the enjoyer and I am the controller, but actually one becomes controlled by the modes. I want to enjoy, and then what happens? You become addicted. You want more. And then sometimes the supply is not there, and then you suffer and you become angry and in the mode of ignorance. So you're not controller of the modes, you are become controlled by them, although you come with the intention of being the enjoyer and controller. So they are entrapped by the three modes of nature. As such, the living entities have to change their material coverings for undergoing different terms of imprisonment. That is to say, they transmigrate of all different kinds of bodies, of all different ways of being enjoyers and controllers. So they change their material coverings, birth and death, and in between old age and disease. The prison house of the material world is created by Brahma under instruction of the personality of Godhead. And at the conclusion of a kalpa, sometimes Prabhupada translates that millennium, the whole thing is destroyed by Shiva. But as far as maintenance of the prison house is concerned, it is done by Vishnu as much as the state prison house is maintained by the state. Anyone, therefore, who wishes to get out of this prison house of material existence, which is full of miseries like repetition of birth, death, disease, and old age, must please Lord Vishnu for such liberation. Lord Vishnu is worshipped by devotional service only. And if anyone has to continue prison life in the material world, he may ask for relative facilities for temporary relief from the different demigods like Shiva, Brahma, Indra, and Varuna. No demigod, however, can release the imprisoned living beings from the conditioned life of material existence. This can be done only by Vishnu. Therefore, the ultimate benefit may be derived from Vishnu, the personality of Godhead. So in this purport, we see that the demigods here, like Shiva, Brahma, Indra, Varuna, people who pray to them for their own sense gratification without worshiping Vishnu, they get temporary relief. You can get very good things from them by placating the devas, but it's material, and your good karma that you've gotten from these activities run out. And then Prabhupada describes people in the material world as like unintelligent children in a merry-go-round. You just go around and around and around. So he's saying this is, release is done by Vishnu alone. Now, we have our Vaishnava Sampradayas, and they are put out by the Brahma Sampradaya. There's a Rudra Sampradaya, who's Lord Shiva. He's also, it's also stated, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu, that Shambhu or Lord Shiva is the greatest of devotees. He is the ideal Vaishnava. Among all Vaishnavas, the best is Shambhu, Lord Shiva. And so Prabhupada says, writing in Bhagavatam, this is from the purport of 3.23.1, Shambhu or Lord Shiva is the ideal Vaishnava. He constantly meditates on Lord Rama and chants Hari Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari. Lord Shiva has a Vishnu Swami Sampradaya, which is also called the Rudra Sampradaya, because one of his names is Rudra. So Brahma himself, who's in charge of the mode of passion, has our own Brahma Sampradaya. Where Brahma and others act as devotees to save people. And we'll learn about them in the course of studying Bhagavatam. Lakshmi Sampradaya Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth, and people worship her for money. She's Lady Luck in the material world. And yet there's also a Lakshmi Sampradaya. And the fourth Sampradaya, the other one is Chatushana, the four Kumaras. They have also originate a Vaishnava Sampradaya. All four are Vaishnava Sampradayas. They are for worshiping Lord Vishnu. The Rudra Sampradaya only worships Lord Shiva as Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu, as the greatest of Vaishnavas. So when they are doing these things, they are not working as independent demigods, but rather they are working, doing this as great devotees who are doing these things on behalf of Vishnu. So if we look, let's look at the other purport by here it is up here. The one supreme Purusha, accepting the gunas of Prakriti, known as Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, for creation, maintenance, and destruction, is called Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. The best result for the devotees will come from Vishnu with Shuddha Sattva body. This is a somewhat complicated purport. He says, it has just been explained, the previous verses in this chapter, that one should perform bhakti alone rather than karma or jnana. Similarly, one should worship Bhagavan alone, giving up worship of the devatas. That Lord, though one, appears in many forms as avatars for past times. Thus, the 10th canto says, Bahu Murtyeko Murtikam. He is one form and many forms. That's 1047. And then he says, the avatars, remember that means one who comes down. We call them incarnations, but since many times they are not in material bodies, they are Vishnu Tattvas. The avatars are of two types. Those which are related to the Chit Shakti, that is the spiritual potency, and those related to the Maya Shakti, the material potency. Those who are related, to the Chit Shakti, such as Matsya and Kurma, are to be worshipped. Those who are related to the Maya Shakti, through Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, are Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. Among them, Vishnu is to be worshipped. That is stated in this verse. So here it is regarding these as the who are in charge of creation, maintenance, and destruction. It does not here talk about them as being Vaishnavas with their own sampradaya. But because both Brahma and Shiva worship Vishnu ultimately. So all of them are really Vishnu worship. He goes on here, even though there is only one Purusha or Adi Purusha in this universe for creation, maintenance, and destruction of the universe, the word stiti adaya is in the verse, stiti adaya, stiti, etc., for creation, maintenance, and destruction, asya, of the universe. The Lord, joined with Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, accepts the names Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. And then he has a little grammatical point. The Sandhi and Hariti is poetic license, a little different from the standard grammar. The Lord is described as Parama, beyond, because though he is linked with the gunas, by his inconceivable energies, he is situated separately from them, untouched by them. So that's how his position is there. He's situated separately, untouched by them, and yet somehow, somewhat indirectly, he is joined too, because they all everything comes from him. Among those forms, these Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, Vishnu will bestow the desired results to the devotees. He is Shreyamsi, the ultimate good. Vishnu is addressed as Sattva Tanu. By seeing verse 25 in this chapter that's coming up, this can only mean that Vishnu possesses a body of Vishuddha Sattva, not material Sattva. Yeah, I want to put 20, I don't know if we can get 25 up here. Hold on a second. Okay. So the translation of 25, you see the word in there, Sattvam Vishuddham Shemaya. Previously, all the great sages rendered service unto the personality of Godhead, Bhagavatam, due to his existence above the three modes of material nature. They worshipped him to become free from material conditions and thus derive the ultimate benefit. Whoever follows such great authorities is also eligible for liberation from the material world. So here it says that this has to the Bhagavatam Adhoksajam, the transcendent personality of Godhead. So see this. So when Vishnu becomes in charge of the mode of goodness, he's bracketed with Brahma and Shiva. But he's also the one who has this existence above the three modes of nature, of his own nature. The other two do so as devotees. Then it's not intrinsic to them. So that he's mentioned this, that this the state of Vishnu. Vishnu is addressed as Sattva Tanu. By seeing verse 25 in this chapter, this can only mean that Vishnu possesses a body of Vishuddha Sattva, not material Sattva, because he's beyond the gunas. So his situation is called Vishuddha Sattva, a purified goodness. That's the spiritual state. Whereas material goodness, wherever there's goodness in the material world, there's always a little bit of ignorance and passion. So, but Vishnu is situated in this idea of Vishuddha Sattva, purified goodness. So he says, otherwise there would be a contradiction to other statements in Shruti and Smriti. And then there's some quotations from the other places, from the Svetasvatara Upanishad. Vishnu is the one conscious witness. Sakshi, he's the witness. Beyond the gunas, nirgunas, he's the witness beyond the gunas. And then quoting the Vishnu Purana, in Vishnu there are no material qualities, sattva, etc. will not be found there. And then, quoting Bhagavatam 10:88:5, Vishnu is devoid of the gunas. He is the person beyond matter. Though Vishnu is involved with the material sattva guna, he is not contaminated by it. So there's the sattva guna, and he's involved with the material sattva guna, that is when it's bracketed with passion and ignorance. But this material sattva does not contaminate him. Vishnu would not take up a material body of sattva, since sattva has the qualities of revelation or knowledge and indifference to enjoyment, because the others want enjoyment. So if sattva should not eclipse the spiritual manifestations of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Rajas is agitating and causes addition, creation, namely procreation is usually the big thing of Rajas, forcing people to all the tribulations of being parents and everything because you want to either take care of your little human children or your little chickies or whatever. It's always a hassle. And tamas is obscuring and causes subtraction. Thus, rajas and tamas will disturb and cover bliss. See, that's what happens when you are in the material world. There's some sattva, but if it's bracketed all the time with some rajas and tamas, your happiness is disturbed. It's temporary. It doesn't last. Thus, Brahma and Shiva accept bodies of rajas and tamas because those gunas eclipse bliss. They have bodies composed of gunas, whereas Vishnu does not. So that's the difference. Brahma and Shiva, it says here, they have bodies composed of guna, of material modes, but Vishnu does not. Vishnu is without gunas, since by being the manifest form of sattva, he accepts proximity to sattva, closeness to sattva. Thus he carries the function of protecting the universe, but does this with no contamination of the qualities of material sattva. See, material sattva is that sattva which is bracketed. It's limited by the other modes. These three are together. Creation, maintenance, and the destruction go around in a circle all the time. But his sattva is called Shuddha sattva. It's purified goodness. There isn't any contamination or any proximity, closeness to the other two modes. So he says he has no contamination. Well, he says here, one cannot say that his existence beyond the gunas is negated by his participation in the world, because he does not possess material sattva by relationship of contact or inherence. It's not in him or close to him. He is situated in sattva only by being next to it, but not contacted to it. There's in some bit of relationship, but it should be understood, however, that his protection of the devotees does not arise from sattva, but from Shuddha sattva of his Swarupa. remember, the demigods are all basically, they have longer lifetimes. That, it's more predominance of the modes of goodness. And so they live long lives. They're not disturbed as much by the demons and by destruction. And so it's different. So he's trying to explain here how that Vishnu takes this role in charge of the mode of goodness, and yet is not simply another demigod. He says, Brahma is a jiva, since he is Hiranya Garbha. That's a form of supersoul, but he's also Hiranya Garbha. Hiranya Garbha literally means golden fetus. And it's referred to as Hiranya Garbha supersoul in the Bhagavatam. But here, Hiranya Garbha with the material body made of Mahatattva. Mahatattva is primordial, undifferentiated material energy before it becomes activated. The distinction between the Supreme Brahman and Brahma is based on the context of descriptions of Brahma, just as the identity of Brahman is confirmed, I think, in the context or by the context. And then this quotation here, Netaro nu papater. The Supreme Brahman is not a jiva by the context of the discussion in the Upanishads. This is like a very intricate analysis of Sanskrit descriptions and how things change in the context. And I have some, anyway. Only because of the powers conferred by the Supreme Lord on Brahma, situated in Rajas, he is considered an avatar because he's in charge of creation. That he has these powers of creation, but nevertheless, he is also able. He's a jiva, and he has that. But yet he's considered an avatar, and here he quotes Brahma Samhita 549. I worship the Supreme Lord Govinda, who becomes Brahma, the creator of the universe, by bestowing his powers to that jiva, just as the sun displays a small portion of its powers of heat and light in all the sunstones which represent it. This is a different translation that we have from Prabhupada. Because Shiva is not a jiva, he's a different tattva. He is Shiva tattva. He's got his own thing. Because Shiva is not a jiva. So Brahma is a jiva, but not like a jiva. But Shiva is not a jiva. But he's considered to be the Supreme Lord associated with the gunas. And here again, he quotes from Brahma Samhita. Shiram yata dadati vikara visheshika. I worship the Supreme Lord Govinda, who becomes the form of Shiva, who is said to be none different from Govinda, but who is also different because of his contact with the transformation of Prakriti, just as milk becomes yogurt, which can be said to be none different from its cause, but acts in a different manner. This is again a verse from the Brahma Samhita, translated here by Vishnu Swami, So it goes on. Some say that of Brahma and Shiva. Shiva is the Ishwara of the Supreme or the Supreme Lord. Others say that he is connected with the gunas. They explain as follows. It should be understood that yoga means connection by proximity, by contact, or by supervision. Yoga is joining together. That's yoga, literally, huge. So he says there's three ways of joining. So you're dealing on this little level of subtlety: proximity, closeness, contact, not more than close, but right there, or supervision. Three ways of yoga, of being connected. The Purusha, connected with the gunas only as the supervisor, is devoid of gunas, being situated in his Swarup. Brahma and Shiva are connected to Rajas and Tamas by contact. So, and therefore called Saguna, endowed with the gunas. Being related to Sattva Guna only by proximity, the Purusha in the form of Kshirodakshayi Vishnu, lying on the ocean of milk, is devoid of gunas, being situated in his Swarup. And that's what we're getting up to in this whole discussion. You know, the subtle idea of how Vishnu can be completely transcendental yet act like a guna avatar. Because he's situated by proximity, but not by contact or by contact or proximity, only by supervision. And then he quotes from the Lagu Bhagavatamrita by, who is that? One of our Goswamis. Huh? Yeah. Huh? I think Sanatana Goswami's Lagu Bhagavatamrita. I think there's a Brihad Bhagavatamrita, then a Lagu Bhagavatamrita. The relation, he says here, the relationship of the Purusha with the gunas is that of being their controllers. Among the three, he who is the Shwamsa, the own self of Swayamrupa Krishna, is not bound by the gunas. So there's a little quotation to back up his point by just being the controller, by supervision, not proximity, not by contact, but simply by supervision. Is that the end of that one? I'm sorry, I want to read it, but it's a little hard to understand.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, actually. That helps to unpack everything. And part of me actually wants to like diagram out all of Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's really, commentary to even visualize it a little bit more. But it's interesting because the conclusion ends up being an argument that Prabhupada states fairly clearly. You know, we can kind of assume, of course, you know, Krishna is not under the three modes, material nature, but Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur really maps it out.
Just exactly how what that connection is with material nature.
Yeah.
And yet not being contaminated, where the others are like a little closer in there.
And again, I can imagine a different audience, right? Like Srila Prabhupada was writing maybe for an audience that wouldn't necessarily be asking all those other questions behind the scenes so much, but Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur is writing within a community where these
things will be clear to them. Exactly.
We do have several questions, but if anybody who hasn't already posted has questions or comments, you can use the raise hand feature if you're on Zoom. You can also type into the chat box that you would like to ask a question or offer a reflection, anything that struck you. And you are also welcome to type your question and comment into the chat box. Same with everybody on Facebook. Thank you for joining everybody on Facebook as well. We see that you're here, and feel free to type in any questions or reflections into the comment chat box there, and we'll read them aloud. So Ramananda Prabhu, he writes, in the purport of text 23, Srila Prabhupada writes, the living entities are separated forms, whereas the integrated forms are all Godhead. Is Shakti Tattva headed by Sri Radha and then her expansions of the integrated or separated category, or is she a completely different category as in Shiva Tattva?
She's not, yeah, she's his own personal spiritual energy, which takes the form of a person. So she is, I guess, does she have her own tattva? I'm not quite sure what the, yeah, she's the internal pleasure potency of Krishna, Ladini Shakti, right? Yeah.
Bhakti Paula says, my very sweet neighbor always brings us prasad on Sunday from their local Sanatana Dharma Vishnu Mandir. Can I accept that? It's been offered to several demigods there, and some devotees say that the demigods will not accept it because it's not been offered to Vishnu first. So Lord Shiva calls in his pretas and bhutas to partake from it instead. I feel reluctant to refuse because she's like a mother to me. She cooks for us sometimes when I'm ill, but not always free of onions and garlic, only sometimes.
That's your problem. I wouldn't. I myself would not. Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't know. You got to find some tactful way to get out of it, but I don't know how to do that exactly. You know, you want to be nice to people and things like that, but yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't take it. Sorry to put you in a difficult position, but I can't find any way why it's really okay. You know?
I guess you could always say something that if this person seems to be a little inclined to Sanatana Dharma, say, I'm very sorry, but my guru has instructed me now to only take prasadam from that has been offered to Krishna.
Oh, that's one way. That's
she
right.
might understand that
yeah,
directly
put it off
without
on
insulting
me,
her.
you know. Yeah.
And Adi Devi says, Hare Krishna Gurudev, please have my humble obeisances. Thank you for the wonderful class. When it is said that the protection of the devotees happens only in Shuddha Sattva, and that our endeavors in this material world, even though in the mode of Sattva, may be temporary, how should we cope with setbacks in our material activities? Is it advisable to continue striving hard despite all adversities or temporary nature of success? How should we channelize our energy towards Shuddha Sattva while being involved in material activities?
You can necessarily sometimes, for just staying alive, be involved in material activities, but you should not take it ultimately seriously. You know, in material activities, there's, everything that you achieve in devotional service is permanent. Whatever you achieve in material activities is temporary. Uh, uh, and if those material activities demand that you somehow cut back a lot on your devotional life or bad for your devotional life, should really find a way around it. Our example is Srila Prabhupada. You know, he was lined up to this Mr. Bose, who had this pharmaceutical business over much of India, large parts of India, at least Bengal, Bose Chemicals. chemicals meaning pharmaceuticals. He's a chemist. It means he's a drugstore owner, not a scientist too. But so the Prabhupada realized that if he took the position that he was successfully going to get, which is inherit the whole business from those who had no children, was going to give the whole thing to Srila Prabhupada, he realized that if he did that, he would not have the time to do what he wanted to do in Krishna consciousness, because he had gotten an order from a spiritual master what to do. And he wanted to be a full-on devotee, because he was also English educated, and Bhakti Siddhanta wanted those people to spread Krishna consciousness. So he did accept, just for maintaining his family on a much lower level than the expectations were, he accepted a distributorship in Prayag, Allahabad, of one of the pharmacy, smaller area than the whole business. That made him the enemy of his wife and his wife's family and some of his children. And he did that so he would be able to perform Krishna consciousness. So one of the things that destroys devotional service is an over endeavor for something that's very difficult in the material world. And you may have to do some things, but if it gets to the point that it makes where you cannot perform Krishna consciousness or take your next step in advancement, then you should trust Krishna enough to be that even if you don't do the material thing, you will nevertheless be okay. Krishna will reciprocate some way with you or another. That's my understanding.
Thank you for that. And next, Anindita has a comment or question. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev.
Hare Krishna.
Please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you so much for a very interesting class. I had this question about Lord Shiva. It's understood that the demigods, they're different positions, and any living entity can take that position. How about Lord Shiva? Is that also a position, or is it his identity, like the person?
Haven't thought about the Shiva Tattva so much. It seems to be not like Brahma, where living entities can get their own universes and be Brahmas, but I don't think that that position is available if you want to be a Lord Shiva. As far as I know, I haven't heard anything like that for the Shiva Tattva. Yeah. But maybe somebody else will know more about it than I do. Somehow I haven't thought a lot about Lord Shiva so much, We want to really avoid the mode of ignorance in many ways, But there is the Rudra Sampradaya and Vishnu Swami and all those people who worship Lord Shiva as a pure devotee. And so that's there, but I'm not very familiar with that Sampradaya or the things that they do. Could be more research for that one, huh?
Thank you, Guru.
Okay.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions or comments? And while we're seeing if there's any.
Hare Krishna.
Oh, Hare Krishna, Vijay Krishna Prabhu. We can hear you. Go ahead and ask a
Yeah,
question.
thank you, Shraddha Devi Mataji, for your service, and my obeisances to Maharaj. My question is related to the following passage that I find in the translation for related to 1:223, and it goes as follows. He accepts the three qualitative forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Of these three, all human beings can derive ultimate benefit from Vishnu, the form of the quality of goodness. So my question is, some Indian people say that even if they worship the demigods for material benedictions, still the end result of this worship will be that the demigod will transfer the worshipper to Vishnu Loka or Krishna Loka, the highest transcendence. Why is that? Because the demigods are devotees of Lord Vishnu or Krishna. These Indian people do not believe that a demigod as Lord Shiva, the best of Vaishnavas, would be there not transferring his worshipper to the best destination. They even dare to say that there is no need for a spiritual master to take us to Godhead. They say that if we worship a demigod, we will achieve both material and spiritual prosperities. My question is, how can we who have accepted a spiritual master should categorize this kind of worship?
As wrong. Should characterize it as mistaken.
Yes, Maharaj.
I don't know where they get this idea that you don't need a spiritual master, and then you can worship any demigod you want and somehow become liberated. Liberation means you become free from all material desires. That doesn't happen. We give, if you're practicing bhakti, we give our senses, engage the senses in the service of the master of the senses. That's the definition of bhakti, to engage the senses in the service of the master of the senses. And that has to be done in that way to become free from birth, death, old age, and disease. Otherwise, I can't understand how people think that somehow they will get to be at a point of transcendence. It doesn't seem that they really want that.
So they're wrong.
Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much for your answer.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Vijay Krishna Prabhu. And I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much. I think we'll wrap it up here for today. Just a couple more quick comments. Mandaleshwari Devidasi on Facebook says, Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you. A very interesting subject. And Laura says, love this. Keep on keeping on. Reminds me of the old days. Om Shanti. I like the word for word translation best. And I appreciate everybody for joining us today.
All right. Thank you all very much. So we'll pick up next time with the next verse 24,
Yeah.
1, 2, 24.
And Yugala Rasa says, thank you, Srila Gurudev.
Okay.
Nice to see you on here, Yugala. Hare
Yeah.
Krishna.
Hare
Nice to see
Krishna.
everybody, actually.
Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
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 Ravindra Maharaj ki jai. Wonderful session.
Jai.